Okay, that marks our time to get started. First of all, we just want you to know that we're really, really thankful for you coming to join us and committing to spend 30 minutes of your day with us as life gets a little bit more back to the normal that we're used to and gets busier. We know it's a little bit harder to take time to step away. So thank you so much for being here. Although our time is brief, we really hope that each one of you is able to take something meaningful away from our session today. So we have some first timers, we have some people joining us again, which is awesome. So as some of you may already know, David has more than 35 years of experience as a family therapist, workshop facilitator, lecturer, and advisor to leadership executives from all over the world. He's worked with CEOs from companies like WestJet, Investors Group, and Lilydale, and presented to countless organizations over the last several decades. He's written multiple books. He's a best-selling author and respected thought leader in our community. David's passion for helping people connect to their most authentic self is just so evident to everyone that meets him. And he has a genuine gift for connecting people with the best versions of themselves. If you're looking for support or guidance or inspiration to help you create a more accountable, engaged, fulfilled, successful team and life, David can help. Today's topic, Learning from Your Life Story, offers just a small sample of what you would experience at our 3-day online Authentic Leadership Academy. In November, we dive into this topic as well as many others in much greater detail. It's going to be really transformational. The feedback when we did this in the spring just was so incredible and so heartwarming. And if you do feel called to join us at the Academy, we'd really love to have you. We'd also appreciate and love for you to share an invite to our next mini session with someone in your life, maybe a new leader, a new parent, or someone who's just been struggling with the responsibility or the stress of leadership and could use some renewed passion. It'd be wonderful to have you share a link. We'll post links to next week, as well as links to all of our social media in the chat room. We'd love to have you be a part of our community on a regular basis. So thank you again for joining us. It's always inspiring and encouraging to see leaders who are committed to learning and growing and showing up as the best versions of themselves. So without further ado, here's David.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for your usual presence and spirit. And it's a great honor to be here. I'm David Irvin, and thank you for spending this half hour with me. In full transparency, I want to share with you my real agenda this morning is to introduce you to the Authentic Leadership Academy, as Kristen said, to give you a taste of this virtual transformational experience. We get people from across the country and beyond, and it's, as people have said, it's really life-changing. And also to introduce you to our SAGE forums, which is Support Authentic Growth Excellence, which is a peer mentoring program. And we'll talk to you briefly about that at the end. So I want to give you a taste of this here. And my whole premise, folks, is that leadership is really split into two categories. Number one, our practices, which is our abilities as a leader. But then there's the presence, our inner qualities. I find it very fascinating, Charles, in his one of his speeches this week about his mother, talked about the legacy that she has left and the mourning that we're all in terms of that legacy of what she did. But then he said, what we will miss most is her person. And I found that very fascinating, her person, these inner qualities. And I don't know that you can teach this. I don't know that you can teach this depth of person, but it can be developed. And this is what we're talking about. See, when we talk about abilities, we're talking about resume virtues, the things on our resume that are important that we bring to the marketplace. But eulogy virtues are what are said about us at the end of our day, and what really truly matters in our life. What do we want to have said about us? It's about humility and clarity and compassion and courage, these qualities of leadership that I want to spend some time focusing on this morning. So in our academy, we have a 3-day program. The first day is on leadership presence. The second day is on leadership practices. And then the third day is all about integration. So this morning, I'm going to give you a little taste of what we mean by leadership, authentic leadership and leadership presence. Next week, we're going to talk about trust. And then the following week, we're going to talk about accountability. And my vice president of client care, Marg Barr, that many of you may have had some experience with, she does an amazing job of taking care of our clients. She's been trying to convince me into giving some, perhaps extend these mini series for a few more weeks until the academy starts in November, and to give you more of a taste of what's there. So if you're interested, just put that in the chat room, and I will certainly consider it. But for now, these are the 3 weeks that we're going to cover. So for some people, they talk about this being a transformational experience in terms of confidence. For some, it's about getting clarity. For some, about it connecting with themselves. And for some, it's about community. And for some, it's all four. So this is what this is what I am most proud of. I still make a living at speaking around the country, and now that we're getting back more and more to in-person. But I can tell you these SAGE forums and with our team and this Authentic Leadership Academy is what I am, that we have developed over these last several months, is what I am most proud of in my work of leadership development. So for today, folks, I'm going to take you on a little journey as usual. I'm going to actually have you reflect on 3 questions. Who are the leaders in today's world? Where does the ability to lead come from? And how do you sustain your authentic leadership? By exploring your own life story. And this is a central part of our work. So first of all, who are the leaders in today's world? Now, I grew up in a world where we had these comics. And what would happen, and some of it, I'm going to date myself here, but we would have these aliens in these comics come and meet with ordinary people. And the first thing they would say is, take me to your leader. So I just want you to stop for a moment and ask yourself, if an alien came into your backyard and said, take me to your leader, folks, where would you take them? I mean, would you take them to the Prime Minister's office? Would you take them to the President of the United Nations? Would you take them to a CEO of a company? I think it's a very interesting question. Where would you take leaders today? And who are the leaders today? And I'm not sure that this is an age where politicians are actually leaders. I haven't seen many politicians globally that I would call a real leader today. But what I have done, and this is it's an interesting thing that you can do in your own leadership development, is identify who would you define as the leaders in the last, say, 150 years, who have been the leaders that you would call leaders, and read about them, discover them, learn about them, learn about their qualities. You could also have a list of leaders that you despise in the last 150 years. But here would be my list in the last 150 years of just some of the leaders. I'm going to call them my significant 7 that stand out for me. And every one of these has a story of how they are a leader. But I think the challenge is that we begin to mistaken. We think if we're not one of these people, we're not a leader. If we're not at the, in charge of something, or if we don't have a high position, we aren't leaders. I'm going to now show you a picture of a leader that I think has probably done more. I know that we have people on board here in the call beyond Canada, but I just as a Canadian, I'm going to suggest that there was a leader that has probably in my generation done more to bring the country together than any other political leader or any other business leader for that matter. And that's a simple little boy in southern BC. And what he did was this young Terry Fox, and Terry Fox run is coming up in this following weekend. So it's prevalent in my mind these days. But this young man was lying in a hospital bed when he was 18 years old, 17, 18 years old. And he saw the suffering around him with other kids who had cancer. And he made a decision. He made up his mind. He made a decision to say, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to step up and make a difference. And he began in his mind, raising a few $100,000 for cancer. And his legacy has, he brought the country, I think, together more than, as I say, any politician. And he's now, the last I have heard, has raised over $800 million for cancer research because of a decision and a passion and a vision. And my premise here, folks, is that we all have a story. We all have a passion. We all, in our own way, are our own Terry Fox. And we may lose touch with that and lose our passion and lose touch with the energy within us. You see, to me, leadership is about lighting a light and bringing that light fully to the darkness of our world. This is a dark time that many would describe. And I'm the only way that my contribution is to bring my light more fully. Your opportunity is to bring your light more fully to whatever you are called to do, whether it's in your workplace, your community, your church, whatever that, your family, to bring that light more fully to the world. And in the words of Rachel Platten, like a small boat on the ocean, sending big waves into motion, like how a single word can make a heart open. I might only have one match, but I can make an explosion. We all have a Terry Fox within us. If we can connect with that presence, it's what the yogis call your Agni, your life force that is burning brightly within you, but we sometimes cover it up and we don't get connected to this light. And we can't possibly connect to the vision in our organizations or our communities or our families or our churches. We can't connect to the vision in those systems until we can connect to the light within us through our own story. Light yourself on fire with passion, and people will come from miles to feel the heat. This is my message, folks. So where does this come from? It comes from your authentic presence, and many of you have seen this picture. It's really just my excuse to introduce you to my grandson, Ethan. But my whole premise around authenticity is that we are born authentic. We're not born accountable. You have to learn to be accountable. We'll learn that in a couple of weeks. But we're born authentic. And my way of knowing when you're authentic is that the three words is beauty, truth, and love. It's pure. This is who we are meant to be. We are born as a seed of possibility, but we grow up in this world that tells us how we should be. We have this thing called an essence. Now, these are my three daughters, and they each have their own essence. My oldest daughter is a creator. She's an artist, and she's taken her work now and become an art worker, does artwork with her creative design in organizations. My middle daughter is a performing artist, and this is where her essence is. Now, these three girls supposedly grew up in the same family, but they bring a different essence to their life. And anybody here with more than one child who's been a parent or as more than one niece and nephew understand right from day one, we bring our own unique fire, our own essence to the world. My youngest daughter is a combination. She's got a loving heart, but she's also a fierce competitor. And she was a very competitive soccer player for all during her upbringing. And those combinations, by the way, that represents to me a great leader, this sense of compassion and this tremendous sense of courage. Now she has taken that and turned, she's now a police officer. So they all have their own unique essence. And I'll tell you, one of the most satisfying things for me in my entire life is to see my daughters find their voice in their work. We call that a vocation. It's the difference between a vocation and a job. When they have fully found their essence and brought it to the work. My middle daughter is a teacher. And by the way, I have to do a little pitch for, we have a podcast called The Leader's Navigator that the two of us run together. This is Haley, my middle daughter. And I would encourage you to subscribe and get a taste of her essence. But we all have this essence. And what are we doing with this essence? And finding our own essence and then creating workplaces where people can bring their full essence to what they do. And once we tap into that, folks, we'll never have to motivate another person as a leader, because that essence will come from within. That fire will burn from within. But what happens is that we learn to hide, we downplay or cover up certain aspects of yourself out of fear that being different or associating with someone different will prevent you from feeling safe. And so what we do is that all of these different aspects we delete. We suppress our heart or our beauty, our needs, our truth, our passion, our creativity, our sexual orientation, our ethnic heritage, our gender, our dreams, the essence of who we are that we're born with. We suppress that in order to feel safe. And what happens is we cover up our genius, for our genius lies in the story of those qualities within us. I hope I'm not offensive to everybody, but here in Canada, we have Thanksgiving coming up, and I just found this. This is the essence of inauthenticity, where we move ourselves through life in order to feel safe. We try to pretend that we're somebody that we're not. I don't know if you've ever worked in a place where you had to leave who you are at the door in order to feel safe, so that we leave our essence, and then we wonder why we don't get engagement, why we don't get productivity, why we don't get full presence of people. So my message is we need to have a process for stoking this inner fire, to keep this inner fire burning. And we go through all four of these if we had a longer time together. It's about slowing down. It's about paying attention. We're all so bloody busy today and reacting to the demands and being responsive to the demands on the internet and from demands of other people that we lose connection. We're so driven by the expectations of the world that we lose touch with our own essence. Creating a compelling why, knowing why you get out of bed in the morning. You know, the number one reason why I hear people get out of bed in the morning is to pee. Well, that's a good place to start. But to wake up every morning with a compelling why. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then learning from your life story and developing a strength building system so that we have on a daily basis a system for building your mental, your spiritual, your physical strength in today's world. Conscious leaders need to have a process for strengthening and stoking that inner fire. But I want to just say in the last 15 minutes here, to how do you learn from your life story as a way of stoking that inner fire? That's what I want to focus on today. My whole premise in my book, The Other Everest, is based on this notion that we spend our lifetime going upward, growing up in the world, going to the next summit, the next achievement, the next height. And so often life, the first half of our life is about growing up. Nothing wrong with growing up, but also in life, there's about growing down. And what we know about growing down is that the Mariana Trench is more than 8,000 meters below the sea level. It's virtually an inverted Everest. And the journey down into yourself, into exploring your life story going down, is equally valid as the story going up. It's just that we honor the Olympic athletes and those in the world that can be posted on the front page of the paper that today dissolves until the next headlines. But we're seen as, as what's visible. But what's invisible is, what about the parent, the single parent who spends 20, 25 years of their life raising children that will never be acknowledged in the front page of a paper or in a Time magazine for the dedication to their children? And yet that journey inward, the qualities that were necessary to bring to that work of a leadership, is equally valid. And so my work, a big part of my work, is to shine a light on this inner experience of our life story, learning from your life story, defining moments. So I'm going to just share with you some of my defining moments. What were the defining moments that made you who you are today, that brought the qualities of your leadership today that you just accepted probably at the time as a crisis or as a dark side of your life, but in the light of time's perspective, as you see clearly in your past, you begin to see that there was a thread that put together, that threaded through all of these life experiences that made you who you are today. It reminds me of a coaching session that I had a few years ago with a corporate client. He was a corporate lawyer, and he was everything that he did. He lawyered up and just treated his whole life, including his parenting, including his work, as being a good corporate lawyer. And it was a necessary role and a good role. He fulfilled it well in his organization. Well, his dad passed away. Dad lived in Ottawa. This was very shortly before the pandemic. His dad passed away in Ottawa. He was the executor of the will. He was sitting with his family. The call came in that his dad suddenly had died of a heart attack. In a very stoic way, he got on the phone. He made arrangements. He flew to Ottawa, looked after the funeral arrangements, created stability. He served a good role, never showed a feeling, never could open his heart because he was the lawyer. He was always acting. His identity with his law practice became his identity in his personal life. It became his persona, and it actually prevented him from being who he was meant to be. Now, how do I know this? Because 6 months later, which is when I first met him, he was out playing in his front yard with his Labrador retriever, threw a Frisbee to the Labrador retriever. They were catching it, and the wind caught the Frisbee, took it out into the street, and the dog bolted after the Frisbee without seeing the car, and the car hit the dog, killed it instantly. Now, this strong rational corporate lawyer picked his dog up and sat on his lawn for 6 hours crying in tears, and it opened his whole life. Now, I saw he and his wife shortly after this, and his wife was greatly disturbed because she was worried that he cared more about his dog than he cared about his father. But what we did is that we were able to reframe his life story to help her understand that his dog gave him a gift of opening up his authentic self that he had been guarded from and protecting himself from all of his life. And what he began to realize as we spent time together is that where his heart was is to take his job, his skills as a lawyer, and bring them into a nonprofit group that made a difference in his community. And he left his corporate job and he began to bring his full authentic self into this. This is the power of a defining moment in your life. We all have them if we'll slow down and pay attention. If we don't just cope with our defining moments, if we don't just survive our defining moments, if we actually allow them to deepen ourselves, we'll get to know ourselves and guide ourselves more fully into the life that we're meant to be, as opposed to the life that is expected of us. Now, I'm not saying that everybody should expect that they're going to leave their job and find a new career in their life. It could very well be that this man could have opened up his heart, stayed in his current position, but brought more of his authentic self in his work as a leader, because based on the identity that he had, he was very limited in terms of his capacity to manage people, to lead and connect with people. And even though he was put into a leadership role because of his competence, he was sorely limited in terms of his capacity to lead. Now, these just happen to be 5 of my defining moments. Facing and surviving. I've got a story about every one of these. Each one of us could reflect on our defining moments. Facing and surviving spinal meningitis at the age of 4. You know, I was abandoned I was in an oxygen tent for a month, for several weeks. And, you know, back. So there's a whole story about that and what emerged out of that. Facing a crisis of faith in my 20s, facing the darkness of trauma, addiction, and clinical depression in my 30s, walking my brother through his cancer journey and eventually his passing in my 50s, and growing through this pandemic. I think the trauma of this whole pandemic has created an opportunity for us to connect more with our authentic self if we'll stop and allow it to go deeper. So in my own story is that I struggled with anxiety all of my life because I'm a relational person. I wanted to open my heart, but I lived in a culture in Western Canada that didn't support boys to have emotions, that didn't support boys to play with dolls. So I blocked off that side of myself. And then my dad struggled with mental illness. He was hospitalized on several occasions. He had what was diagnosed in those days as manic depression. And I went to school anxious. There were days I wore dark pants to school because I often wet myself on the way to school because I was so afraid to be there. And there was no resources in those days. I would often throw up on the way to school. And that all percolated up. Now, what happened was that I got into a religion in my teenage years, and I became compliant, and I lost my voice out of compliance. But it helped me create a safe place. I actually rebelled from my family by going to church. Most of us do the opposite. But my rebellion was I invested deeply in this religion, fundamentalist religion. And what happened was it all exploded, and I left the church in my 20s because I wanted this. I thought that freedom, I thought that if I just did whatever I wanted to do, that would give me freedom. But it took me into a darkness of addiction. And I just ran from the trauma because I never healed the trauma. But then when I got into my current marriage, I met my wife in 1988 and got into my current marriage. I was stabilized for a while, but then it all exploded about 26 years ago in a 2-week depression, clinical depression. I was in a fetal position for 2 weeks. And it took me into a recovery journey. And I can tell you today, I mean, depression is a complicated thing. I don't in any way want to be prescriptive. There's a biological component to it. There's a mental component to it. And there's a spiritual component to it. And what I began to realize that the depression and anxiety in my life is not to be run away from, but it's to be worked with and embraced and appreciated through the eyes of compassion, to realize that I get anxious and depressed today when I move away from my authentic self, when I become too compliant or too reactionary to the demands of the world, and I lose my voice. And so depression for me has become a voice from my soul to help me realize I need to get myself back on track. It's not to be judged or depleted or diminished in some way, but rather to be listened to. And this is the words of my mother, who in her wisdom left this in her journal. Every parent, hence the title of my presentation today. Every parent, no matter how hard they try, will be both a blessing and a curse to their children. Every parent on this call will be able to relate to that. My hope is that my children will appreciate the blessing, if not immediately, then later in life, and perhaps more importantly, that they will take the curse and, like an oyster irritated by a grain of sand, over time use it as a catalyst to build layers of character and understanding, thus producing a pearl. This is our work, folks, is to take the pain in our life, the pain of our life story, and turn it into a pearl by working with it. And this is the real focus of my work. Passion comes from the Latin word pati, meaning suffering or enduring. This is where our passion is born. I meet many leaders today who are out of touch with their passion. And I can promise you, if you don't know what your passion is, there's pain in your life that you have covered up, because when you cover up and protect yourself from the pain in your life, you will also protect yourself from feeling the passion. It all comes together in one human spectrum. The authentic journey embraces a time of great difficulty, allowing the pain to break us open so that a stronger, wiser, kinder self can emerge. You can judge any one of these stages of this transformation, from a caterpillar to a butterfly, and think this stage is pathology. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be sent to a psychiatrist. And I don't want to minimize the power of psychiatry and the importance of psychological help and therapeutic help. It can all guide us along the way. But let's stop pathologizing adversity and seeing as something that wants to be born, that at some time in your life became hidden. And this is the work of authentic leadership. This is the work of, this is my brother who I cared for 3.5 years. His dying awakened my living. His dying awakened to me this desire within me to put myself out there and to start to have these public retreats and to guide leaders to their authentic self. His dying, the last thing that I ever heard my brother say to me is, find your voice. This is when he has aphasia and he couldn't put two words together. He had a brain tumor that he was dying from. But he managed, the last thing he said to me is, find your voice. And this is my voice that I bring to the world. This is my life's work. You'll all know when you study with me more, this whole notion of ikigai, which is aligning your gifts with your passion, with making the world better and with your contribution. And this is the result of exploring deeply our life story and having our gifts and our passion emerge so that we can begin to build organizations where we fit people. We don't try to fix them. We find their gifts and their passion and find a way to make a difference. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. We are all unique, but let's get rid of this notion that we have to project some kind of image of perfection. And my message today is, folks, bring more fully who you are with all of your cracks, with all of your what we label as faults, and recognize this is how the light is getting in and this is how the light goes through. Authentic leadership hinges on the insight that who you are as a person is your most valuable contribution. The more present you can be for yourself and the more at peace you can be with yourself in any given moment, the more able you are to impact those you serve. That's why Gandhi had the impact that he had, because of his presence. Okay? If there is light in the soul, there will be beauty in the person. If there's beauty in the person, there will be harmony in the house. If there's harmony in the house, there will be order in the nation. If there's order in the nation, there will be peace in the world. This is where it has to start. To come to peace with ourselves and to compassionately embrace all of who we are. Warm your heart with fire within, then share it with the world. This is the work of authentic leadership. So with that in mind, again, if any of you have any questions about what we're doing in this academy, if this intrigues you, you want to spend more time with me, please reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got. We can schedule a call. If something stirred today, I would love to hear from you. This is my life's work. It's not a job for me. It is what I'm called to do. And I'm shining the light that I can as best I can in this world in an imperfect way. So on that note, I am going to stop recording and bring us back. I'll spend the next 5 or 10 minutes, if you'd like, answering any questions.